The rain fell in sheets that night, heavy enough to blur the streetlights into hazy halos. Ethan Miller gripped the steering wheel with one hand and flicked on the wipers with the other, squinting at the lonely two-lane road that cut through the outskirts of Maplewood. His daughter Lily slept in the back seat, her tiny frame curled against the seatbelt, soft breaths fogging up the window beside her. He had promised her hot chocolate when they got home, but the storm had slowed them down. Up ahead, a stalled Jeep sat half-buried in shadows, hazard lights blinking weakly like a distress signal. Beside it stood a figure in drenched fatigues, struggling to lift the hood against the pounding rain. Ethan slowed instinctively. Something about the scene tugged at him, a soldier, alone, out in the storm. He pulled over, grabbed his umbrella, and stepped out into the torrent. As he approached, the woman looked up, rain streaming down her face. Her eyes, sharp yet weary, locked with his. "Need a hand?" he asked. She hesitated. I can manage." But her trembling fingers told a different story. And in that single, rain-soaked moment, Ethan had no idea that helping her would rewrite both of their lives. Ethan Miller had never been the kind of man to seek attention. At 34, he lived a life defined by quiet routines and the constant hum of responsibility. His world revolved around Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, whose laughter filled the modest 2-bedroom house they called home. Every morning, Ethan woke before sunrise, packed Lily's school lunch, and brewed himself strong black coffee. He worked as a freelance carpenter, taking odd jobs around town fixing porches, building cabinets, sometimes repairing the old wooden pews at the church down the street. The pay wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it kept food on the table. Lily was his anchor. After his wife, Emily, had passed away in a car accident 4 years earlier, Ethan had nearly drowned in grief. Nights were the worst when the silence pressed down, and he could almost hear Emily's laugh echoing through the hallways. But Lily needed him. Her small, fragile hands had clung to his shirt, as though he were her only lifeline. And in many ways, she had saved him as much as he had saved her. He kept the house tidy but lived like a man always bracing for the next storm, tools arranged in neat drawers, emergency kits stocked, a winter shovel propped by the back door even in spring. He double-checked the locks each night and triple-checked the windows when the forecast called for rain. He had learned that safety was not a promise but a practice. Maplewood was the kind of town where people remembered your coffee order and asked about your mom by name. The diner smelled of butter and bacon, and the hardware store owner, a round-bellied man named Gus, always added a few extra nails to Ethan's bag for luck. There was comfort in the routine. Predictability kept Ethan's mind from wandering to the hollows of what had been lost. On the drive home that rain-soaked night, Lily had fallen asleep, clutching a crayon drawing she'd made in class. 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun, Ethan, Lily, and a wobbly outline of a woman with long hair, smiling. When he'd asked who the third person was, Lily had said, "Someone who'll like us." It had sat between tenderness and heartbreak, and Ethan had kissed the top of her head with a softness that surprised even him. The storm came down in heavy sheets, wipers doing their best to carve sightlines into a world smeared by water. Streetlights melted into halos. The road curved around a stretch of pines, and then he saw the Jeep hazards blinking like tired fireflies and the figure in fatigues, shoulders squared against the rain. Duty in her stance, weariness in the way her hands fumbled with the stuck hood. He checked the rearview mirror. Lily slept on. Ethan pulled to the shoulder and killed the engine. The cold hit the moment he opened the door, a wet slap that soaked through his jacket. He grabbed the umbrella and jogged into the storm. "Need a hand?" he called, voice raised over the pounding rain. The woman looked up. In the brief flare of lightning, Ethan caught the cut of a strong jaw, the sharpness of eyes tuned to threat. Her hair was tied back, rain dark and plastered to her neck. The uniform did not hide the stiffness in her movement, the tightness in her breath. She hesitated, assessing, choosing. I can manage," she said. But the words didn't match the tremor in her fingers. He angled the umbrella to cover them both and reached for the hood release. "I'm Ethan," he said, as if names could build trust faster than tools. "There's a little girl asleep in my car, so if you're worried I'm an axe murderer, I promise I'm not." The corner of her mouth twitched. "Sarah," she said after a beat. "Captain Sarah Thompson." She looked embarrassed at the rank, as if it might come off like a boast in the wrong company. They worked in silence for a moment. Rain drumming on the umbrella. Steam rising from the engine like breath in the cold. The problem turned out to be a loose terminal on the battery and a fuse that had given up the ghost. Ethan had spares in the back of his truck because of course he did, and within minutes, the Jeep sputtered back to life. Sarah's shoulders lowered the tiniest fraction, a relief that barely cracked the armor. "Thank you," she said. The words sounded like they were crossing an ocean. "Roads'll be bad all night," Ethan said. "You live far?" Sarah looked past him at the black slick ribbon of highway. "Other side of town. I'm staying with a friend for a few days." She hesitated, then added, "I just got back." He didn't ask from where. He didn't need to. The uniform answered for both of them. "Follow me," he said. "I'll drive in front, safer that way." He angled his head at the back seat of his car. "She sleeps better if I'm not swearing at potholes." Sarah's eyes softened at the mention of the child, then sharpened again as if catching herself in a moment of vulnerability. "All right," she said. "Thanks." They caravaned through the rain, hazard lights blinking, wipers working at full tilt. Ethan dropped Sarah near a quiet corner house with a broad porch and a swing that creaked even in the storm. She raised a hand in a half-wave and disappeared into the shadows. The porch light came on a moment later, a small circle of warmth in a cold night. Ethan turned the wheel toward home, only then realizing his hands were shaking. Sarah Thompson was not a stranger to storms, but civilian storms felt different. There were no protocols for the way guilt pooled behind your ribs, or how domestic light kitchen windows glowing warm behind curtains could make your heart ache harder than any battlefield. She had learned long ago that the body could be trained to endure, but the mind was a trickster, looping unfinished scenes and unordered blame until sleep felt like trespass. She towed off her boots just inside the door of the house where she was staying, a friend's place. Empty for the week, while its owner visited a sister in Atlanta. Her duffel sat at the foot of the couch, neatly squared. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and rain. She listened for too long habit, training, cataloging sounds, the old refrigerator's hum, the tap of branches against the window, a loose gutter spilling water in an uneven drumbeat. The face from the roadside stuck with her. Ethan. The unshowy kindness of him. The way he'd stood between her and the rain without making a speech about it. The moment he'd said, "I'm not an axe murderer," with a crooked attempt at humor that managed to uncoil something in her chest. The mention of his daughter, so offhand and full-hearted at once. Sarah rubbed her temple. She shouldn't have given her name. She shouldn't have stood there, letting a stranger look her in the eye like that. The world had edges, and hers were sharper than most. Her phone buzzed. A message lit the screen from an unknown number. "Captain Thompson? Were you able to make it to your destination?" She frowned, then remembered she'd accepted a call earlier in the day from a VA outreach coordinator who'd promised to connect her with resources in town. She typed back, "Yes. Thank you." A minute later, a second buzz. "If you need anything." She turned the phone over and set it face down. Thunder rolled in the distance. She closed her eyes and saw a road under a different sky, heat haze stuttering the horizon, the way smoke looks wrong when it's rising from flesh instead of fires built for warmth. She opened her eyes again, steadying herself with 3 slow breaths. Sarah had come back, because her mother's voice over the phone had sounded like a brittle thing under pressure, and because the army had blinked, processed her papers, stamped them with words that made a life sound manageable. Honorable, completed, reassigned, return. She was none of those things to herself yet. She was the sum of choices and casualties, and she had not catalogued either. She showered quick and hot, and stood too long under the stream with her forehead pressed to the tile. When she came back to the living room, she found herself at the window, fingers parting the curtains a fraction, scanning the street automatically. A dark sedan rolled past slow, tires hissing on wet pavement. The driver never turned to look, but Sarah felt seen anyway. She told herself she was being paranoid. She'd repeated those words enough times to know they didn't work. On the coffee table lay a small plastic folder the VA counselor had given her: flyers, numbers, pamphlets with smiling groups of people around tables, the caption reading, "You are not alone." She reached for it, and instead found her hand drifting to another object. The small silver pendant that had sat in the side pocket of her duffel since base. It was meant to be good luck what a young medic had pressed into her hand the day before their last patrol. The medic had not come back. Sarah closed her fist around the pendant and let the house be quiet around her. Somewhere out there, a single dad with a sleeping daughter had turned his car toward safety. Somewhere out there, she had been seen as a person, not a uniform or a rumor. She slept, when she finally did, with the lights on. 2 days later, Sarah ran into Lily first. The elementary school had posters of paper suns taped to the windows, each with a crayon smile and spiky yellow rays. Sarah had come at the request of Madison, an old friend who taught 2nd grade and who possessed the kind of warmth that made kids confess to sneaking extra snacks without fear of punishment. Madison had insisted she stop by. She had a box of brownies and a dozen questions she'd always wanted to ask about life. Over there, which Sarah had no intention of answering. She parked, double-checked the locks, and forced herself to unclench her jaw before getting out. The rain had gentled to a fresh damp, the kind that made the air smell of earth and leaf. As she rounded the corner to the main entrance, a little girl barreled through the doors, backpack bouncing, hair in 2 slightly uneven braids. She nearly collided with Sarah. "Whoa," Sarah said, catching the girl with a gentle hand. "You all right?" The girl's eyes were bright, the exact color of the sky on a clear fall day. "I'm good," she said, then peered up at Sarah with the frank curiosity of kids who haven't learned to hide it yet. "Are you a soldier?" Sarah glanced down at her own jeans and jacket. "No uniform today, but some things you carried, whether you wore them or not." "I was," Sarah said. "For a while." The girl's smile widened. "Cool. My daddy helped a soldier in the rain. She was really pretty and had a Jeep. He said she was brave." She leaned closer, conspiratorial. "I think she was you." Sarah blinked. Something like warmth and fear tugged in opposite directions behind her ribs. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lily," she said. "I'm 7. I like dinosaurs and lasagna. My daddy makes the best lasagna, but he burns the garlic bread sometimes because he forgets the timer." She said it with affection, not complaint. "Do you know my daddy?" Sarah laughed, the kind that surprised her when it came, like the sound didn't believe it was allowed. "I think I do," she said softly. "Tell him I said thank you again." Lily nodded solemnly. "Okay. Do you want to see my drawing?" She yanked open her backpack and pulled out a crumpled paper. 3 stick figures, hands linked. Under a bright Sunday, Sarah felt her breath catch. "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it too much. Madison found them a minute later, calling Sarah's name across the courtyard. She enveloped Sarah in a hug that surprised them both. "You came," Madison said. "You look." She stopped herself. "You look like you." "Working on it," Sarah said. They sat on the low wall by the entrance for 10 minutes, the way old friends do who know they have to move slow, because a lot of ground is marked and mined. Madison talked about the school's fundraiser for new library books. Sarah nodded and smiled in the right places, letting the mundane details wash over the parts of her that buzzed too loud. When she left, Lily waved at her from the door, a single fierce motion like she was directing ships from a lighthouse. Ethan noticed it first as a pressure at the edge of ordinary. It started with the black sedan idling too long at the end of his street on a Tuesday afternoon. He could chalk it up to a delivery driver checking a GPS. He could explain most things away if he tried. Then there were the footprints he found in the mud by the back fence after a night of rain. Then the sense, call it intuition, call it parental alarm, that someone's eyes lingered too long on him and Lily when they walked from the car to the front door at dusk. He told himself he was being cautious, not paranoid. He told himself he didn't want to live his life looking over his shoulder anymore. He also started checking that the knife block was full and that the flashlight had fresh batteries. He hadn't expected to see Sarah again. People arrive in your life like weather, he told himself, and depart the same way. But Maplewood is small, and the rain had a talent for shaping paths to cross again. He ran into her outside the grocery store, both of them juggling bags like small tactical operations. She looked less guarded than she had on the road, but still wore vigilance like second skin. Her eyes softened when she saw Lily perched on the edge of the shopping cart, a loaf of bread like a crown in her lap. "Hey," he said, because sometimes a single word is the bridge you need. "Hey," she echoed. "About the other night, thank you. It was just a fuse," he said. "I'm better with splinters and squeaky hinges, but I know my way around a fuse." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I owe you coffee." "Coffee sounds good," Ethan said before he could talk himself out of it. "There's a place on Elm that doesn't overbrew the life out of their beans." "Tomorrow?" she asked. "If you're free." "After school drop-off," he said, glancing at Lily, who was building a fortress out of cereal boxes. 9? 9, she agreed. When he returned to his truck, a small card tucked under the wiper caught his eye. He expected a flyer for lawn care or a missed parcel notice. Instead, thick white cardstock with block letters, capped, "Thompson, you know what you did." There was no number, no signature, just the sentence, stark and heavy. Ethan looked up quickly, scanning the lot. An older couple climbed into a sedan 2 rows over. Teenagers laughed on their way inside. The world was ordinary. His pulse wasn't. He slipped the card into his jacket pocket and told himself not to tell Sarah not yet, not without understanding, because he didn't want to throw fuel on a fire that might only be a trick of the light. The coffee shop on Elm Street had wide windows and the kind of plants that thrive even when neglected, which Ethan decided was encouraging. Sarah was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table with her back to the wall so she could see the door and still watch the room. He noticed the detail and pretended he hadn't. "Carb therapy?" he asked, nodding at the plate of blueberry muffins. "Seemed safer than tequila," she said. Their conversation started carefully, like tightrope walkers finding their balance. He asked about the Jeep. She asked about his work. He talked about the cabinet restoration he was doing for the library. She talked about her mother's garden and how the tomatoes would be late this year. Something to do with rain and soil pH that she remembered because her mother had said it 3 times on the phone. They avoided the big ones: war, loss, the math of regret. But Threads showed her cadence tightening when a door swung too fast. His voice going soft when he said his wife's name. "I'm not good at this," Sarah said finally, surprising herself with the confession. "Talking, not blurring out the edges with humor or silence." "I used to think I was," Ethan said. "Then I learned how much can hide in a house where everything looks put away." She met his gaze and held it. "I'm trying to be a person," she said. "Not just a uniform that people project stories onto." "You're doing fine," he said, "for what it's worth." Their second cups went lukewarm as time went strange, stretching and folding. It should have been simple. Maybe. In another town, it would have been. As they stood to leave, Sarah's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and went still. A text from an unknown number. 5 words. Same message Ethan had found on his windshield. "You know what you did." The air changed between them, like a storm drawing oxygen out of the room. Her eyes flicked to his. He saw the calculation happen there, swift and efficient. She started to say, "Sorry," or "I have to go." He couldn't tell which. When the bell above the door chimed, a man in his early 40s walked in worn leather jacket, stance that said military even if you didn't know it. Ethan didn't, but Sarah did. His gaze lassoed the room and tightened around Sarah. He smirked, just a shred. "Captain Thompson," he said, not loud, not soft. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Small world. Sarah drew herself up without seeming to move. "Do I know you?" The man tilted his head. "We were in the same sand once," he said. "You left some of us there." The room did what rooms do when danger walks in, wearing a face that smiles nothing. The espresso machine hissed. A chair scraped. Someone laughed at a joke on a screen. "Let's go," Ethan said to Sarah, quiet and firm. The man stepped aside with a half bow. "See you around," he said. "We all will." Outside, the sky had the washed-out look of a day that couldn't decide between sun and rain. Sarah stood very still on the sidewalk. Ethan wanted to put a hand on her shoulder and also wanted to give her a mile of space. "That wasn't random," he said. "No," she agreed. "It wasn't. Do I need to worry about Lily?" Sarah swallowed. The answer lodged in her throat. "I'm not sure," she said, because if there was one thing she owed him after he'd stood by her in a storm, it was the truth, even when it scraped on the way out. "But I think we should assume yes." Ethan nodded once. A decision landing. "Okay," he said. "Then we make a plan." They met again that evening, this time at Ethan's place, because secrecy was a fiction and daylight was limited. He preferred to talk where he could watch Lily build a tower of blocks on the living room rug and be reminded of the stakes. Sarah arrived with a grocery bag in one hand and a mental map of exits already embedded in muscle memory. She handed Ethan a jar of marinara and a bag of pasta like a peace offering. "I cook," she said, "but I'm out of practice." "Then we'll practice," he replied. He could feel the house reacting to her presence, the way a room changes when a new piece of furniture is moved in same edges. Different gravity. Lily liked her immediately, with the efficiency of children who measure character by play, not pretense. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Lily asked. "Velociraptors are efficient," Sarah said solemnly. Lily grinned like she'd found a secret twin. "Same." Over dinner, they drew lines on paper, literal ones mapping routes to school, to the grocery store, to Madison's house. They wrote down names of people Sarah trusted, people she didn't, people she couldn't put in either column yet. Ethan shared the card from his windshield. Sarah showed him the text messages more had arrived, each a variation on the theme of accusation. There were no demands, no threats you could hold like evidence. just the weight of implication. Who was he? Ethan asked, meaning the man from the coffee shop. David Crane, Sarah said. She kept her voice even. Staff sergeant. Good soldier. We were on a patrol together in Helmand. Things went sideways. What does sideways mean? Lily asked, not looking up from her tower. Like when you try to carry too many blocks and they fall, Sarah said. Oh. A problem, solvable by smaller stacks. Lily nodded, satisfied, and moved on. When Lily was in bed, the grown-up version of Sideways came out in low, measured sentences. An ambush. Cross-chatter on the radio. A decision made in minutes that cost an hour too much. Crane had disagreed with her call. A man named Perez had died doing what she asked him to do. An inquiry had cleared her. The company had split to new assignments. Grief had not. He wants a target for his hurt, Sarah said. And I am the right shape. Do you believe you made the wrong call? Ethan asked. Not to judge, but because naming the ghost changes it. Sarah flinched. I believe I made the call I had with what I had, she said. And I believe we lost him anyway. I believe everything I say after that sounds like a defense. She scrubbed a hand over her face. What I know is that Crane wasn't the only one who felt that way. There were 3 others. They made their opinions felt before we rotated out. How? Locker notes. A shove here, a silence there. The kind of attention that says we see you, and not the way you want to be seen. I filed reports. Some things got documented. Some didn't. Her laugh was without humor. I was told to keep my head down and my record clean. And now he's here, Ethan said. And the others? I don't know, she said. But if he's here, they won't be far. They wrote an email to the local police, crisp and factual, attaching the photo of the windshield card and a screenshot of the texts. They did not expect much beyond a file number. Maplewood had shoplifting and lawn disputes. It didn't have a protocol for small-town war ghosts. When Sarah left, the night felt too big around the house. Ethan walked the perimeter with a flashlight, and the practiced patience of a man taking fear seriously, but not letting it run the schedule. He checked the windows twice. He looked up at the sky because sometimes you need to see a thing larger than the problem to give yourself perspective. Inside, Lily slept with her hand fisted around the tail of her stuffed fox. Ethan stood there a moment longer than he needed to, trying to decide if the fear he felt was old grief, adapting to new facts, or something fresher. The knock came 3 nights later. It was nearly midnight when it sounded, the house gripped by that peculiar deep silence that comes only after all the appliances have given up their hums and even the rain has decided to rest. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, in front of a woodworking video he would never admit was soothing. He woke at the first rap, an old instinct snapping him to alertness. 3 knocks. Measured. Not timid. Not aggressive. A confidence that set his teeth on edge. He checked the clock. He scanned the hallway to Lily's room. He rose, without turning on a light, and moved to the door. Through the peephole, a face half-turned, adding just enough anonymity to itch. Male. Late 30s. Early 40s. A cap pulled low. A raincoat. Dark. And unremarkable. Ethan thumbed his phone awake, opened the security app, confirmed that the porch cam had a clean image, and hit record anyway for the reassurance. He cracked the door, the width of the chain. "Can I help you?" "Night, sir," the man said, voice calm as a middle manager. He held up a plain white envelope like a service doc. "I've got a message for Captain Thompson. She's staying here, right?" "She's not," Ethan said. He kept his voice as steady as the man's. "And even if she were, this isn't the hour for messages." The man smiled a fraction, as if Ethan had performed as expected. Just being neighborly, he said. Tell her some old friends are keen to reconnect. Ethan shut the door until the chain drew tight. He slid it free, opened the door fully, and stepped into the frame, not out, not in. Your name, he said. Doesn't matter, the man replied. He placed the envelope on the welcome mat with care. But tell her we remember. That's the thing about the past. It shows up. He walked away, unhurried, steps quiet in the night. Ethan waited until the man reached the end of the walk, then another 3 seconds for good measure. He scooped up the envelope and closed the door with the softest latch he could manage. Inside, he broke the seal with a paring knife. One sheet of paper. Thick, clean. Sharpie letters like they'd been inked by a hand that thought about pressure. He didn't have to die. Underneath, a map of Maplewood with 4 addresses circled in red. His house, Madison's place, the school, and the porch where Sarah was staying. Ethan's heart climbed into his throat and attempted to dig a hole outward. He inhaled once. Slowly. The way he used to when Lily was a baby, and crying had its own weather system. Then he dialed Sarah. She picked up on the second ring, voice fully awake. Ethan, don't panic, he said, which is what people say right before panic. But we had a visitor. I'm on my way. No, he said, more sharply than he intended. He softened it. No. Stay there. Lights on. I'm calling the police. I'll forward you photos. Send them, she said. He heard her moving in the background, the shuck-shuck of blinds. Is Lily okay? Sleeping, he said. She didn't wake. Good. A breath. I'll get to Madison's tonight. No. She adjusted on the fly. No, that puts Maddie at risk. I'll go to my mother's. She's stubborn and lives like she invented 911. She'll like the excuse. A pause. I'm sorry. For what? That the storm is in your house, she said. We'll weather it. He said. He sent the photos. He called the police. He sat in the dim kitchen with the note on the table and felt the old feeling life dividing into before and after again, but this time different. This time he wasn't vertigoed by grief. This time he had weight in his hands, a daughter down the hall, and someone on the other end of a call who would not let herself be lost because some men had decided that blame should be a circle they cast around her. When the police arrived, young Officer Delgado took statements with the awkward earnestness of a man who had never done this before and wanted to get it right. He promised patrol cars would swing by more often. He didn't promise they would always be there when needed. He couldn't. After the cruiser left, Ethan stood at the window until the sky lightened from black to a kind of tired blue. He brewed coffee he didn't want because ritual is ballast. He wrote call school on a slip of paper because lists are nets. When Lily shuffled into the kitchen with her fox dragging, hair sticking up like she'd dreamed of electricity, she found the mug of hot cocoa he'd set out without thinking, and the calm in his smile that he layered like paint. Daddy, she said around a yawn, can we invite Sarah to my school play? I'm a tree. We can ask, he said. I bet she would like that. He wondered if the play would happen before or after the next knock. By noon, the story had taken on that peculiar quality of danger that looks like ordinary life with a buzz beneath it. Madison called to say she'd seen a car idling outside her house early in the morning, a model she couldn't name because cars were not in her skill set, but the license plate had out-of-state tags. She'd snapped a photo because she was the kind of woman who assumed evidence would be useful eventually. Sarah forwarded the plate to an old contact who could run it without making a federal production of it. The answer came back quick. Rental. Cash deposit. No helpful trail. At 3, as Ethan sanded the edge of a cabinet door in the workshop behind the house, His phone vibrated with a new video message. He wiped sawdust from his fingers and hit play. The footage was a collage, shaky, too close, shot from across the street with a long lens. Lily skipping from the school bus. Madison loading groceries. Ethan mowing the front lawn. Sarah silhouetted in the window of her temporary place, head bent as if reading. No soundtrack, just the hiss of static. At the end, white letters on black. "We're watching." He felt a cold that didn't belong to the weather. He forwarded it to Delgado, then to Sarah with a single line. "We need to move faster." They met that evening at Sarah's mother's house, a tidy bungalow draped in rose bushes and the scent of baked lemon bars. Mrs. Thompson was exactly as advertised, a woman who looked at a problem like it had arrived to be solved, and who handed Ethan a plate of food with the same confidence she reserved for calling the phone company and getting an actual human on the line. "You're the man from the rain," she said, appraising him without rudeness. "Thank you for your help that night. I didn't raise a fool, but grief makes fools of us all sometimes." "Ma," Sarah warned. "Hush." Mrs. Thompson turned to Ethan again. "You look like a man who knows which end of a hammer is which." "I do okay," Ethan said, trying and failing not to like her. "Good. We're going to secure my house. If these boys want to knock again, they'll find out what a latch looks like when it's ready." They worked for hours reinforcing door frames, adding motion lights, checking blind spots in the yard. It felt like building a boat in the driveway while the storm gathered offshore. Mrs. Thompson made them tea at midnight and informed them that she had a Louisville Slugger by the bed because she believed in the Second Amendment, but trusted wood more than metal in tight quarters. When the clock neared 1, Sarah walked Ethan to his truck. The night smelled like rain that hadn't decided to fall yet. "They're not going to stop because the police file a report," she said. "No," Ethan agreed. "But sometimes people like this need to be seen. They get braver in the dark." "They'll test that theory," she said. "Soon." "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" she asked. "That you have to fight a war on 2 fronts," he said. "Out there and in here." He tapped her chest, not touching but gesturing to the place she kept barricaded. She blinked once, slow. "I'm learning," she said. "Me too." She looked at him like she wanted to say something else, but the words held back, cautious animals. Then she did the simplest, bravest thing. She stepped forward and put her hand on his forearm. The contact was brief, precise. It said, "I'm here in a language that didn't need translation." "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night, Sarah." He watched her walk back to the porch and felt a twist of hope and fear, so tightly braided he couldn't tell which strand was which. 2 nights later, they took their shot. Ethan was sanding a tabletop in the workshop, headphones over his ears to drown out the circular saw at the neighbor's place. He almost missed the sound glass fracturing, but some part of him had cataloged the world well enough to register the wrongness. He pulled the headphones off, and the second sound came, a window shattering at the front of the house. He didn't think. He moved. Lily. He had to get to Lily. He sprinted for the back door, but the silhouette of a man blocked it, broad and heavy. A speed born from training. Ethan pivoted, momentum barely harnessed, and snapped a clamp from the workbench as an improvised baton. The man lunged. Ethan brought the clamp down hard on the forearm that led the movement. Pain has a way of equalizing most arguments. The man grunted and recalibrated. "Where's the girl?" the intruder hissed. Ethan didn't answer. He threw the clamp, not to hit but to make the man flinch, and used the fraction of space to slide past, taking the inside line like a basketball player taught by a father he barely remembered. He slammed the interior door and threw the deadbolt, buying himself seconds. "Lily!" he shouted, taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Closet, now!" "Daddy?" Lily's voice was high, thin with fear. "Now," he said, gentler and harder at once. She ran. He followed, hard hammering a primal code. He tucked her into the hallway closet they used for winter coats. He pressed the emergency flashlight into her hand, and the small whistle they'd agreed to use only in danger. He had not explained the kind of danger that required a whistle. He didn't have to now. "Quiet," he said. "No matter what. I'm here." He closed the door and turned to face the stairwell where another shadow rose. The new man moved lighter, more contained. His stance screamed military. He was not Crane, but he was cut from similar cloth. "Where is she?" the man asked. No preamble. "Who?" "The captain," he said. "This is where she belongs." He threw the first punch. Ethan blocked. The kind of block you learn from being hit a lot when you're young and getting smart slow. He absorbed the impact and countered with a flat palm to the sternum that made the other man step back enough to reconsider. Then not. They crashed into the hallway table. Keys danced. A picture frame fell and broke. The man's hand snapped out for a neck hold, but Ethan twisted in, closed the distance, and turned it into an awkward grapple where brute force had fewer advantages. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a father in a house he refused to cede. The first man reached the top of the stairs behind them. "Move," he snarled. And it was then, in the worst moment, that the best thing happened. The hall light seared on, and a voice cut through the chaos like a knife that knew where it was going. "Back away," Sarah said. She stood at the far end of the hall, feet planted, pistol level and steady two-handed grip, breath controlled. The men pivoted like puppets yanked by their strings. "David," she said. And this time the name was not a question. Crane smiled in that same small way. "Cap," he said, "we brought you a message." "You brought a felony into a home with a child," she said. "Step away from him." "You left Perez," Crane said, like the words were a sacrament. Sarah's eyes did not flicker. "Perez died a hero doing his duty," she said. "And you're dishonoring him with this." "Big words for a report," he said. "Bigger for a courtroom," she replied. "On your knees. Hands behind your head." He laughed. The other man didn't. "What if I say no?" Crane asked. "Then I shoot you in the leg and we start again," she said, in a tone that carried the ungilded weight of someone who had done hard things for the right reasons and would do them again. Ethan saw the calculus happen: pride, risk, the need to win a narrative. Crane exhaled. He took a step forward, just enough to force the scenario. Sarah fired once. The bullet bit the floor between his feet, a warning shot that left no ambiguity. He froze. "That's a discharge in a home with a minor present," he said, grasping for legal ballast. "Self-defense," she said. "And you know it." Sirens. Distant at first, then nearer. Officer Delgado had been circling more often, it turned out. Neighbors had called. The night had decided to witness itself. Crane looked at the other man and saw the loyalty he thought he owned wobble. "On your knees," he muttered to his own. And if there was a God, it smirked. They knelt. They laced their fingers behind their heads. They stared at Sarah like they could imprint a different outcome by will alone. When Delgado and a second officer took the men into custody, the house exhaled so hard it had to inhale twice to recover. The officers read rights, documented damage, called for backup. The words became procedural, which is another way of saying the immediate danger had passed. Ethan slid open the closet door. Lily launched into his arms with an audible sob. She'd saved like a hard candy to unwrap when it was safe. He held her so tight, the future had to wiggle carefully to get in. Sarah leaned against the wall as if the drywall might be capable of sharing strength. Her hands shook, noon-sized, not midnight, as the adrenaline hitchhiked out of her veins. Her eyes found Ethan's over Lily's hair. 1,000 things were in that look: apology, gratitude, fear, relief, something else she would not let herself name, but mostly a single fact: alive. The next morning, sunlight poured into the house with almost indecent cheerfulness, glittering on glass shards, like if you looked quickly, they might be diamonds. Mrs. Thompson arrived with a broom and a pie, the two pillars of any American crisis resolution, and scolded the officers for not wearing booties over their shoes, until one of them, a woman with a grin that could diffuse electricity, calmly produced a pair from her pocket. Delgado took statements again, more complete this time. Crane invoked a lawyer before he should have had one, which is a way of saying he was not improvising as much as he wanted people to believe. The other man, Corporal Jeremy Tate, said very little beyond confirming his name and asking if his mother had to be called. He was 37. Men are complicated. Within 48 hours, charges were filed: breaking and entering, assault, intimidation, contributing to the delinquency of fear. The last is not on the books, but Delgado wrote it in the margin of his notebook anyway, as a reminder that words matter. In the days that followed, the story spread through Maplewood, in the way stories do in towns with front porches. The facts were plain. The interpretations were not. Some called Sarah a hero who had followed protocol in a crisis. Others, quieter but not absent, wondered if war had followed her home because she had not left it properly there. This is how communities test their own seams. A letter arrived at the DA's office 2 days later from a soldier named Rivera who had been in the same unit. He wrote plainly, "Captain Thompson's call saved 4 of us. Perez's death was not her failure. It was an ambush we all walked into that day because we were all there to do our jobs." Crane has been telling himself a story. I'm not letting it be the only one on record. It's remarkable what happens to a case when a counterweight like that lands on the scale. Sarah read the letter in Mrs. Thompson's kitchen with her mother pretending to wash dishes she'd already washed. Because sometimes the mercy you can give a person is to occupy the room in a way that says you're not alone without making them perform gratitude. She folded the paper very carefully and slid it into the plastic folder from the VA. "You are not alone" looked less like a cruel slogan and more like a possibility. Ethan came by that afternoon with Lily and a replacement window pane. He and Mrs. Thompson argued amicably about caulking, as if a world could be made safe with enough sealant. Lily drew a new picture at the kitchen table. 3 figures again, hands linked. This time, the woman had short hair and a small badge drawn near her heart. "Brave," Lily wrote above her head, carefully sounding out the letters. Sarah's eyes stung again. This keeps happening, she thought, like her body had decided to learn the language of the town 1 tear at a time. She knelt to be at Lily's level. "Is that me?" she asked, already knowing. "Yes," Lily said. "You're a hero." Sarah glanced at Ethan, who was trying to look like he didn't care if the window was perfectly squared when clearly he did. He met her gaze and held it with a warmth that said not the kind with capes, the kind who shows up. That evening, just before sunset, there was another knock at the door. Sarah felt her pulse jump even as Mrs. Thompson muttered, "For goodness sake, what now?" and marched toward the entryway with her bat. On the porch, no shadow waited, no envelope, no threat. A uniformed courier stood there, ticket book in hand, slightly out of breath. "Delivery for Captain Sarah Thompson," he said, checking the name twice to make sure he didn't flub it. "What is it?" she asked, more gently than she felt. He handed over a thin box with a return address from the base. She signed. He left. They gathered around the dining table with the caution of people who had learned to expect strange things from small containers. Inside, on a bed of folded tissue, lay a metal case. Not the shiny kind handed at ceremonies with cameras, but a formal, quiet one. A letter sat atop it, typed and signed by a commanding officer who had been 2 ranks above her. The words were measured and exact, for meritorious service under fire, for decisions consistent with duty and values, for leadership that saved lives. Sarah stared at it like it belonged to a different person who shared her name. Mrs. Thompson made a sound that might have been a sob, or a laugh, or both at once. Ethan reached across the table and rested his fingers on the edge of the letter, as if to keep it from floating away. The last line was written in pen, not typed. Perez's family asked that you receive this. They wanted you to know they don't hold you in their grief. They hold you in their gratitude. Something unclenched in Sarah's chest that had been locked so long, she had forgotten the shape of the key. She closed the case and set it aside. Then did the thing she had not allowed herself. She cried. Not like a soldier, not like a witness, but like a person whose heart was tired and unbearably hopeful. Ethan stood, rounded the table, and didn't touch her until she leaned into him of her own accord. When she did, it was with the kind of trust that says, if I fall, you'll spot me. He did. Mrs. Thompson wiped her eyes and sniffed, then announced she was going to check on the garden because somebody had to be practical. Lily came in from the living room and wrapped her arms around Sarah's waist without asking permission. I'm glad you're here, Lily said. Me too, Sarah whispered into the top of her head. Weeks passed. Routine reasserted itself because that is the soft rebellion of the living. The court dates lined up on calendars. Crane posted bail someone else's money, no doubt, and kept his distance under the pale leash of a restraining order. Tate pled out early and wrote an apology letter that read clumsy and honest enough to be real. Ethan fixed the window and then stayed to fix a creaky kitchen cabinet because it squeaked at a frequency that made Sarah's shoulders inch toward her ears. He taught Lily how to sand wood with the grain, and she informed him that wood had feelings and did not like it when he rushed. Mrs. Thompson declared herself satisfied with the new door reinforcement and baked a pie for everyone on the block because safety is a communal project. On a Saturday, when the sky was the kind of blue that makes painters angry, Sarah and Ethan took Lily to the park. Lily climbed the jungle gym like a small, competent explorer. Ethan watched her. Sarah watched both of them and felt the unfamiliar sensation of her mind standing down, the way a guard dog lies in the sun but keeps one ear tuned. When they returned to the house, arms full of grocery bags, there was a knock, 3 quick taps, then a pause, then 2, not an intruder's rhythm. The code had no menace in it. Ethan opened the door to find Madison standing there with a stack of flyers and a sheepish grin. I'm running the bake sale, she said. Someone smart told me that when bad things happen, you answer with cookies. She handed Sarah a flyer. Maplewood Community Night. Thank you to our veterans. Music. Pie contest. A moment of silence. A fundraiser for the school library, because Madison was incapable of making any event about only one thing. I don't... Sarah started, then stopped. She had been living at the edge of the town, half in, half out, as if refusing to claim it would keep it from claiming her back. Maybe it was time to test the reverse. I'll come, she said. But I won't make a speech. Good, Madison said. No one needs speeches. They need faces. The night of the event, the town green looked like a postcard string lights, folding tables, a brass band attempting John Philip Sousa with more heart than skill. Delgado waved from the dunk tank, looking like a man choosing penance as PR. The mayor made a brief remark about community and resilience. No one mentioned names. Everyone knew them anyway. Sarah stood by the lemonade table with Lily, who was collecting votes for best brownie with the gravitas of a Supreme Court justice. Ethan hovered near enough to be there, far enough to let her have her own orbit. people approached Sarah in ones and twos, the brave and the curious. They said thank you, and we're glad you're safe, and, once, I was wrong. She heard the words and let them land. Near the end of the night, an older woman with a cane walked up. Small and fierce. "You don't know me," she said. "I'm Perez's aunt." Sarah's mouth went dry. "Ma'am," she said, because no other word had the right shape. The woman took Sarah's hand in both of hers. "He loved the army," she said. "He believed in the men and women he served with. He knew the risks. We wanted you to have that medal because you represent the kind of leader he respected." Her voice tightened, but the hand did not. "We don't want his name to be the blade used to cut you down." Sarah swallowed the sob and let the woman see it anyway. "Thank you," she whispered, which felt like a translation too simple for the enormity of the gift. After the woman left, Sarah found Ethan without looking for him. He was already watching, the way he did with his whole attention. He nodded once, the smallest celebration. "Let's go home," she said. They walked back under the string lights, Lily skipping between them, each of them holding one of her hands. The air was cool with the first hint of fall. The night felt like a door opening, not shutting. At the house, another knock sounded light, almost tentative. They turned. Madison, again, this time holding a small, neatly wrapped box. "Last one, I promise," she said, and pressed it into Sarah's hands. "For you." Inside lay a key, the spare to the little classroom at school. The room with the reading nook, where Lily sometimes fell asleep at free time, and where Madison had been teaching kids the arithmetic of kindness for 10 years. Attached to the key was a note. "When you're ready, come read to the class. Tell them any story you like. Or don't talk at all. Just be here. You belong." Sarah held the key like it might dissolve if she warmed it too much. She looked at Ethan. He didn't speak. She didn't need him to. "Okay," she said to the night, to the town, to the version of herself that had been edging back from a cliff one controlled breath at a time. "Okay." She hung the key on a hook by the door, next to Ethan's truck keys and the spare for Mrs. Thompson's shed. She toed off her shoes and felt the familiar give of the rug under her feet. Lily yawned theatrically and announced she was a tree who needed to be planted in bed. Ethan scooped her up with a groan he exaggerated for laughs. "Good night, Sarah," Lily murmured sleepily from her father's shoulder. "Don't let the velociraptors bite. Only if they ask nicely," Sarah said. Ethan paused at the base of the stairs. He looked back at Sarah standing in the entryway, the faintest smile on her lips, something like peace casting a long shadow behind her. He thought of the first night in the rain, the Jeep's hazards blinking like a failing heart, the way chance built bridges you don't see until you're halfway across. "Good night," he said softly. "Good night," she answered. No thunder rumbled. No sirens split the dark. The house, once the stage for a battle, held a quieter kind of sound, the stir of people learning a durable happiness, the small shifts of a life rearranging itself into something that might be called whole. And if, now and then, a knock came at the door, they opened it together.